Hello and welcome. I'm Sue Britz,
And I'm Tina Lookbach. Welcome to Retired.
the podcast where we talk about what life is like when we put on new tread, new wheels that move us to our next adventure. Today we'll be continuing our second discussion of the wonderful book, This American Ex-Wife, How I Ended My Marriage and Started My Life by Lyz Lenz.
And I'm excited to continue on a different leg of the journey. This book is also a journey, right? About retirement, how she has retreaded herself.
Absolutely. And we have retreaded ourselves, new identities, new lives. Okay, so Tina, I knew this was going to happen when we discussed the first chapter because it is so dense and so rich and it touches on everything. And the rest of the book goes through a lot more detail on each of these things. And Liz does an incredible job with the research. You should see the section at the back that has all the notes and all the sources that she's quoted and all the research she's done. It truly is a thesis of a work. So let's move on. You had the idea of perhaps talking about themes or rather than chapters. We've kind of covered chapter one. I mean, like I say, we could go on for days on chapter one. But let's move on. What do you think?
Sounds great, Sue.
All right. So chapter two, Just a Girl in a Country Song. She talks about her upbringing.
I just have to jump right in. This whole chapter spoke to me as well. And ironically, I fell in love with country music on my honeymoon because when we drove through the United States, that was pretty much all there was through the Midwest, which is pretty much the longest part of the drive to get to the other side. And so I started listening to all the stories because that's what country music often is. It's a story. And the parts that she had talked about were so true, where there's so much anger in there at the cheating, stealing, drinking, and yet you want your man. And
I can't relate.
She talks about both. You cannot relate?
No, if you're stealing and cheating and all and drinking and abusing, I'm like, no. And that's that's where the danger was in our relationship. So there was different kind of dysfunction. It's a different kind of dysfunction where you're literally running everything in the household and having to raise this man child along with it. So yeah, that would be the country song I would sing.
Right. And I'm not saying that I supported that, that I would want a liar, cheater, stealer. But what I'm saying is that was the message. And that it's like, even though he's got all these faults, we still want a man.
Oh, God.
And that's what I'm saying. And that is the sickness of it all, is that even if he's cheating, we still need a man. Even if he's drunk every night, we still need a man. That was the message.
Yes.
And that is a very sad, sick, twisted message. So there's strength in the woman because she's ready to take his clothes and burn it on the driveway. Yet she wants a man.
And she wants him back. Yeah. You're right. And this is the that popularity of that message, whether it comes in amazing songs and songwriting, or whether it's religion or whatever, it's the system that supports that. Liz says in chapter 2, it's not easy to untangle the choices of your life from the forces of culture. It's not easy to understand if what you've chosen was your choice or the only choice you had available to you in a world designed to limit you.
Or so you thought. And that brings me to Brene Brown. She wrote a book called Belonging, and that is our biggest problem. To find the courage to get up and refute and dispute the norm. No one questions the norm because we're all afraid of being excommunicated from the clan. And that's really what keeps us stuck in systems that are sick, which is what Liz, is doing, is breaking out and saying, this is the marriage experience and I'm going to call it out for what it is. And it's a scary thing because don't tell me she's not getting a ton of hate mail. There's probably a lot of women that have written her horrific things. She's ruined her children's lives. She's ruining American culture. I can even just imagine. And and here is something that I want to point out that ties into this cultural thing. Quote from her: "Wives in songs often went after the other woman when it was the man they should have attacked." And this is a perfect example of women not uniting together. Instead, we continue the patriarch because we're still standing behind the man.
Yep.
We're protecting the man and vilifying the woman.
Yep.
And it's true. That man made the commitment to that marriage. It was not the woman on the outside. It was the man's choice. And yet that was the theme. And I don't know how much that's changed, but that is what it's been. So I think another important thing is that we stand united. Women need to be united.
Amen. That brings us to chapter 3, down the aisle. So this in this one,
Oh,
obviously,
shit.
it's I got married in 2005. That's what she says. It was a small wedding. She goes on to her details of her wedding, and I just feel this idealism. But her wedding was in the midst of a lot of stuff going on in her personal or family trauma and loneliness, and her desire for love and order and patriarchy,
Mm-hmm.
really. And that's what we're conditioned to. So in my upbringing, it's about religion. So I was raised
Correct.
in the Catholic Church, and there's at that point in my life, I was starting to really actively question my beliefs. I had come back from a year in Spain and seen firsthand those beautiful cathedrals and all the gold that was
Mm-hmm.
taken from the Americas at the cost of a lot of human life, brought over
Mm-hmm.
to Spain, and again at the cost of a lot of human life, and then the artists using their art to beautifully, because this is the only thing you were allowed to show your art was through the religious um through religion. um and I started really, that in itself was enough to activate feelings that I had had since a child, when I remember having to wear a veil in church, and then I remember that was
Wow.
allowed to not happen anymore. But when a girl has to wear a veil in church, and you're with your,
Again, not a man.
yeah, your brother is right there, his
Is
age
free.
mate, he's an age mate, your best friend, he doesn't have to wear a veil. It does set a tone. It's like, and then
He's not sucking air through a filter.
and
You
then
are.
the church leader is a male telling you, eh, and that's okay. But there were no female church leaders. I mean, a sister was
Nope.
not the church leader. It was very clear. So I just felt like there was something wrong all along. As a young child, knowing there was something wrong here, that there really wasn't fairness. And I guess I didn't learn till later that there's no such thing as fair. I mean, you can try to attempt fairness, but it doesn't exist.
So, Sue, in all fairness, I go back to when Warren and I married. I was very much an example of society doing all the right things. I was the good girl, as were you. Um, and I too took religion. I didn't start to doubt it so much. I almost bought into it more. And so when I made the promise in that altar, or at that altar, to do it forever, and I even used the old rules, which I laugh at myself now. I wanted to be so traditional, Sue, that I did the honor and obey within my marriage vows. And as I evolved and changed my views of how I think Jesus was, to where the church had taught it differently in some ways, that was an evolution that got me to the point where I could divorce, because I thought I made such a promise to God. And I made such a promise in the way that religion held it. But I finally got to the end of the marriage and realized, would Jesus have done this? Would he have tolerated this? When he talked about, you know, two people coming together, he doesn't write it as a lopsided thing. No, you're supposed to respect the person that you married. So actually, Jesus would probably say, honey, you got to start putting down boundaries. And if this ain't going to work for you, get out because I wouldn't tolerate this. This is not how you're supposed to be treated. And when I finally realized, wait a minute, I'd done my job. I'd given him 100% of love, a beautiful home, an environment he could be proud of, children he was proud of. So where did I get the respect and the kindness and the nurturing? I didn't. So I realized that's my fault. That's on me. And I don't think God would have wanted that. And I think God would have said, you know what, honey, it's time because you've gone to therapy. You've learned that it's not going to change. And so, honey, you have two choices. You can either stay and continue until you die or he dies, or you can get out and, you've got another life here. And so it's up to you. It's your own free will, but I'm not holding this as something you need to do. This promise that you made to me, I know you gave it your all.
Yep.
And that was how I got out.
Gave it your all and then some.
Hmm.
So Liz says, the past is never far from us. Marriage is an institution built on the fundamental inequality of women. As much as we'd like to think everything has changed, you only have to attend a modern wedding in a church and see a bride dressed in virginal white with a veil, see a couple exchange rings, a symbol of bondage, and know that no matter how transformed the institution is, it's still inherently unequal. A wedding is still women's work, setting the stage for a partnership where she will still cook, clean, work, raise kids, and feel like she needs to look good doing it. And because a couple doesn't quote scripture doesn't mean the model still doesn't hold its power.
Absolutely. I want to go into some of the facts that I got out of there, and I shuddered once again because um, I was asked at some point to get rid of all my credit cards that were in my name because I had Target, I had credit cards from all the department stores, and I was asked to stop that because,
By your ex.
um, yes. So the one card that I would not let go of was the one I got in college. I just said, absolutely not. I want one card in my name, thank God. Because, and I'm tying it back to, she had said that in 1974 or 1970s, it was only then that we could get credit cards and mortgages in our name.
It's 50-year anniversary. Yeah.
Okay, so frightening as I divorce, what, 40 years later? Yeah, 2014. It was scary because I only had one credit card to my name that had money. And I couldn't take out any other lines of credit because I was a stay-at-home mom, so I had no job. And because or hold on, I worked part-time, and luckily I was able to get a like a loan. It was only $5,000, but I got a $5,000 loan because of that part-time job because it happened to be in the community of a local bank. Otherwise, I would not have had any money. And can you imagine? And I think about all the women who have written away their credit cards, their ATMs, their everything. And now you have absolutely no power. You have no power without money. So that was one of the first things I learned is freedom comes from the power of money. If women do not work, if women do not have a job, if women hand over all the financial trust into that person that they love, they hold zero power. And that means no getting out. That means imbalance in an even greater, scarier scale. So I just want to point that out. If you're listening to this and you're thinking of divorce, make sure you've got lines of credit in your name already.
Well, the other thing that just this inequity of around money, there's so many things we could talk about here, but one that always gets me is your house, your car, the big purchases are under, your name. It's okay, so the car is in the name of the two people. The word and is in there, but the first person listed gets a lot more
Oh,
Uh,
I did not know this.
they're considered the primary, and it just makes me ill, how when you
Wow.
how well, it would come to that person's address and not to the secondary person's address.
It should
Dupli
go to both.
Right, duplicates are not sent out, and, it's, yeah, that's a tough one too, and then we'll talk about the names too, because then changing names is always very confusing too.
So should we segue into chapter 4?
Well, yeah, we can do that.
Chapter 4, the name change. This is one of the things. I was so excited to ditch my name only because it was ethnically different, always made fun of, completely mispronounced, and I just wanted something normal. So for me to have a very boring basic name was kind of a great thing at that time. Then as you mature and you realize how cool it is that you come from another culture, that you speak another language, that your roots are from a completely different place, you get more mature and you realize this. But, when you're so young, you don't know. Anyway, so I gladly changed my name, but upon divorce, I had a paper and all I had to do was submit it and everything would have been done. But here I am, and I'm thinking to myself, is it fair for the children? As we show up and I go to school events or we have things held under a name, is it going to hurt them every time they hear my last name, my maiden name? And so I did not change it. I regret it sometimes because in the end, did it really matter? I mattered too. So I held on to this name that created so much pain. So what I did do is when I began teaching full time again, I had everybody refer to me in my maiden name. There were still problems with the downtown office, but at least in my classroom, I had dignity in hearing my name again instead of that name, especially because we were both in the district with that name. And it was always amazing too if anybody knew that name. They would then say, "Oh, you're the ex-wife of." You're still not
You.
Tina.
Yeah.
You're you're now, instead of the wife of, you're now the ex-wife of, and all the stories that come behind it that have been told from different ends. So the name actually, she goes on to talk the whole chapter about the importance of a name, but in the end, and we spoke once just recently, I embrace all my names. I now embrace my biological father's name. I embrace my adopted father's name. And I have come to embrace this name because you know what? They're all a part of who I am.
Yep.
They're all the names that created who I am. So I hold them and I hold the space for them.
Yep. Um, I'm gonna back up to the beginning of chapter 4, and it starts off. She says, "From the first day of my marriage, I became the wife. This was a joke. My husband told me when I objected, just a joke. His term of endearment for me." So, Tina, you have your own version of this, and I remember when I met you, and then I met your ex at the time. I was just so turned off right away, instantly, like uh, uh, a flip of a switch. Yeah, because I felt it for
So
you.
I'll be really honest and open with this part. That name that was created for me was created the day after our honeymoon night, after we went to the place that I hated all through childhood, which is a yucky, depressed town in the middle of the desert because it was an easier access to the interstate to continue on our journey for our honeymoon. And he looks over at me that next morning and he's like, "Wifer." And from that day forward, he called me wifer. And I never liked it, but I kind of came to laugh at it. And I noticed she does this a lot throughout the
Yep.
book. Like he would say something and then she would laugh.
Yep.
And I'm learning
Yep.
that laughing is I could either drop into fetal position and cry, B, kill him, C, kill myself, or D, laugh it off. And so laughing it off is always the best option. But wifer. So that was another thing that triggered me is remembering it's not loving.
No.
It's not loving. It's an object. It's a possession.
Yep.
It's a wife. I'm not a Tina anymore.
Yeah, changing the names, changing your identity. You are no longer
And your
your
story?
wife. Being called a wife. We operated a lot in dual language, so I didn't really have that. Um,
I was thinking about how you evolved with your name.
I changed my name. I remember thinking as a young person that I would keep my maiden name because I am who I am. But then my idealistic self, when I got married, was to embrace my Latin husband's surname because I love the idea of joining family names together because it doesn't take away your name. It just adds his on at the end. And that hyphenated thing, which became, they didn't hyphenate in Latin America. They used they and e and so forth. But for me, it worked because I embraced that because it was a way of embracing him, his family, his culture. And it would have been wonderful had he taken my name as well and embraced that. But that would be a bridge too far, I think. I also liked, like you said, the idea of the child knowing that they had my name as well. So our daughter had both our names. All of our names were different last names, which gave you an identity, and that kind of worked for me. It really that thought around it kind of worked around patriarchy, but still bringing families together, and I liked that idea. But obviously, when I got divorced, there's no way I was going to hold on to that. Um, because he wasn't holding on to mine. And there was a big rejection of me. So, I'm just going to reclaim myself. In this chapter, Liz mentions the little girls growing up thinking they're going to be changing their last name and, being ready for that. And that's not always the case still today. But uh, here she says, quote, "If you are lucky enough, we tell little girls, if someone loves you enough, he will take away your identity and give you his."
Wow.
And right away I think, how does that make him feel? What does that tell a little boy? That he has that power to
Wow.
and does what are the feelings around that? Just a question.
I have to bring up one other thing that shocked me. It doesn't have to do with the names, but it is in chapter 3. And it was for centuries, rape was defined as between a man and a woman, not his wife, establishing the fact that no matter the reality, legally, a husband could do what he wanted with his wife, and he did. Those laws began to change in the 70s.
Yep. Yep. And there's a lot of silence right there. Well, the name thing is interesting because as a teacher, we know that kids' names are so important. Just being able to pronounce them, to say them, to use them appropriately. Our names mean something to us, and they're our identity.
True.
And so when we divorce, women who have taken their husband's name have to go through this whole process of shedding that and or not. And it's another level of burden on women to have to go through that because it's not easy shifting identities. Um, it's a lot of work and can be heart wrenching, but it's also beautiful. You're able to recreate yourself. So there is some power in being able to do that. But it creeps up. You still get mail under the old name and get his mail and it shows up in things that like records that you've changed multiple times and you've sent
Yes.
it in and it still shows up and you're like, damn,
Really?
damn, and you're like, but they don't get that. They don't get those reminders throughout their everyday life. And here's the thing is I'm trying to train myself not to have that gut reaction, just instead of going, "Ah," it's more like, "Ah, yeah, I don't have to deal that. That's not me
Yes,
anymore.
that's
I'm a
correct.
different person. I don't even know."
It
And it feels sometimes it feels like I don't even remember that life. It's amazing. Well, that's the other thing. It's a weird thing that part of our identity and in legal documents or whatever our government documents, they ask, "What is your marital status?" You're single, married, divorced, separated, um, and unless you're remarried, you have to, in theory, say you're divorced. Well, aren't you just single? Once you've divorced, aren't you single?
That's a really good
I
point.
never, I don't get it. Why do I have to walk through life? I'm divorced. What is that?
Yeah, but
It's so done
you
and
know what?
over. It's so
No,
done and
you're
over.
absolutely right, but it's also how you want to look at it, Sue, because you're like, I'm divorced. This is how I would say it. I'm divorced.
I know, but still, I'm single, or then you're remarried. So if you're,
No,
I'm,
no, in some ways, I don't even want to use the word single. I am just me.
yeah. Well, the government requires it. And so I'm remarried. So do I need to say I'm remarried, divorced? I'm a
Remarried.
remarried, divorced, single woman. All your statuses. I mean, what the hell? What is that?
I like that. All of those things. You are actually now, we should just check all the boxes. Yes, I am single, but I am divorced. I am remarried and I am married. That is correct. But what are you? All of those things.
Yes,
Just like my last
yes.
name
It's your history.
encompasses all those names.
Yes.
Hmm.
The other thing that came up in this chapter that I relate back to school too is thinking about students is I used to teach uh, fifth grade, and so fifth grade we talk about the the establishment of the United States, and so to do that you go back to exploration, the age of exploration, and how I used to do a simulation where we would with some setup and everything. We would have a crew of kids come in and explore the classroom, and they would come in and they would invade. They would guard the doors. They would take the items that belong to individuals and then remove people from the room, and to simulate this idea of an invasion. So
Wow.
it's kind of a similar
So
thing
good.
when you and kids remember that they they were
Always.
prepared and they learned that deeply. But so Liz says when colonial invaders would conquer a country, they would quickly rename the cities verbally, symbolically, taking control of the language and the identity. It didn't matter that it was my choice. It was I was now a conquered territory. That was yeah, you're conquered. You're given a new name verbally,
It just
symbolically,
brought up
taking
all of it.
control.
Yeah, as I've been studying the Cuban history, it's Columbus started here. Um and renaming all of the Caribbean before we even made it over to Latin America. And it was the same thing: new flag, a stick, a new name, registered with Spain. Like, isn't it interesting how everybody tied into this is Spain? Like, all of a sudden, Spain has ownership of what wasn't theirs, but they claim it. And so it's the same kind of thing. It's just walking in and claiming it. This is now mine.
Well,
This is now
right,
mine.
and it's things that claiming things for ownership that can't be owned, like the idea of owning land was, you
Oh,
know,
so true.
owning a human being. So yeah, you come in, you're changing a name, and it changes the identity. It does.
But again, I have to say that it is a cultural buy in, just like slavery. Somehow, people were able to just say, hey, we're going to own people. And the culture then said, okay. Somehow the culture bought into it. That is the sickness of it all. That's the sickness of the being married and losing your identity. It's the same kind of thing that we all just buy into it somehow. I know that's kind of extreme, but it is the same thing in this ownership of land. All of a sudden, you just walk in, claim it, put a name on it, and now it's yours. It's the same thing. It's just equally, or not equally, it just progressively is worse. But it does start with the woman losing her name, if we look at it that way. But in my case, I chose it, so I own it. I made that choice. I didn't have to.
Yep.
And thank you all the women before us that made it so that at least it was a choice, which I would not repeat.
So yeah, when we talk about taking those vows and changing your name and all that, um, I really relate to Liz in this. She says, "I thought I could do it. I thought I could be myself, independent and whole, and change my name. I thought I could be an equal partnership and be a mother. I was wrong. Not because I didn't try hard enough, but because the entire
Yep.
system was rigged against me. And I should have recognized that the moment I gave up my name just to make our marriage work." Yep.
We learn. And sometimes it takes years to learn things. It takes the right timing to learn things. The point is, she learned.
Right.
We learned.
And this is the part that gets me is like you can learn, you can realize, you can be blamed for your choices and everything, but you're still living in a system built against you. So you can learn all you want, but you only have so limited options.
Chapter 5 was another doozy for
The
me.
heterosexual repair project.
So I'm going to jump in and say that part of the fortune that I walked away with is a family that bought a whole bunch of real estate and taught my ex and I to do the same. And so we fixed up all of our homes. And the last home we went to, I really pushed to have. Um, and really, again, it was for him because he needed a project. Because if he could be happy on a project, my life would be calmer. So I pushed this horrendous, horrific project. And within 1 week, the plumbing went out after we moved in. Boxes still all over the place. I had a 1.5 year old and a 4 year old. And at that time, we had a mini bulldozer come, rip out every plant, and destroy our pool because it was too dangerous and too costly to fix. And all of the debris was put along the side of our home. And the debris was piled to the tops of all the windows along the entire side of the house. And that was another time I called and said, "Could you please come home? Our sewer broke and we need to clear out this debris and get it fixed fast." And he couldn't. So I did what I could, and I brought out all the debris and made 5 foot by 5 foot piles all along our cul-de-sac with a 1.5 year old screaming in her crib. And I was fortunate to have 3 hours where my other daughter was at preschool. And so here I am single handedly preparing it so that they could dig later, again, alone. And I think about when I asked, could we not add on to our other rental property because I'm pregnant with second child? And when second child comes this time, I would like some more help because I know what I'm getting into. And so, no. And then I think about all the times that I helped fix, clean, repair with children in tow with him all of these rental properties. So I have redone and restored and been a part of the refurbishing, restoration, and remodeling. And again, this was one of those things where it all just came flying back. I guess I could handle a job, Sue, because I was handling
Yeah.
a job plus remodeling homes. And you were in the thick of it. You saw these things that we were doing
Yep.
to all these homes. And we paid for very little to be done outside. So I would have to say that her molds coming through the walls, half-assed jobs, I understand it.
Yeah.
I understand it.
Yeah.
I feel like I was just creating a beautiful facade, painting over the decaying relationship as much as I was painting over a decaying home.
So Liz uses a metaphor, our analogy that we've done with our retired Did you catch it when we read this chapter?
I'm still shaking at what I just
Yeah, I
said.
know. I can feel it too. She says, "Let the past be the past," people told me.
Yeah.
Don't look in the rearview mirror. Keep going forward. I always hated that metaphor because behind you is an essential part of driving. If a car you are driving hits something, you look in the rearview mirror to see what it was. You pause, you assess, you pull over to take care of the damage. That's what no one wants to do. We are a nation of hit and runners. We don't want to deal with the consequences. Yeah, and along the way, all these things that we hit and want to assess. Yeah.
Oh, that struck me, and that was one of my highlighted parts of the book. And I would also like to say that sometimes you have to go back and you have to look at what happened so that you can learn from those experiences to be sure that in the future you don't do those things again, or you do it better, or you do it differently. And so I think that you have to look back in the mirror. The difference is, don't stay there, look at it and move on from it once you've learned the lesson. But sometimes you just got to keep going back till you learn the lesson. But I think the problem is people choose to live there instead of living their lives.
Right.
That's the
A-
difference.
And
Tricky.
the fact, Lenz describes that women carry, a lot of the cognitive load, and I was talking about that before. It's like at some point you got to do some of this, but take over some of this because I can't do it all. But anyhow, cognitive load is a real thing. So women are the ones who are noticing, analyzing, and monitoring issues in the marriage. And like you say, you've got to learn, analyze, think, and make decisions based on it and move forward. Maybe you file something to in your little brain to use later on, but at some point, um, yeah, we're the ones doing the monitoring. Moving on to chapter 6, the easy way out. I don't know if there's such a thing.
Um, the place that struck me the most from that chapter, and it's true, um, it's not easy to make the choice to leave, and it is absolutely the most painful thing I've ever done. But you have to sometimes choose your hard
Yes,
in life.
choose your heart. I like that.
And I chose a hard that was going to enact change and give me the possibility of happiness.
Hmm?
And I didn't know if I was going to be happy. But what I did know is if I stayed, I would be eternally unhappy. So I took the chance and I gambled. And as difficult as it is, and she says it, I say it, I'm sure you say it, I have never regretted this decision. Despite every pain, despite everything I lost, despite it all, I would do it again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's not a moment where I haven't ever regretted it. It's interesting because in this chapter, she talks about all the all the current everything that goes against that. So they went to uh, their therapist, but they went to pastors as well. They're saying that uh, being in a marriage is about being God blesses persistence. That you This is about having us be holy. Okay, and you're supposed to just keep going. The other one is um, where you talk to your family who might your parents, the previous generation who believe these things, who have ingrained us with those things as well. And she realizes I had to be this man's chef, this his laundry service, and be grateful when he said thank you. I got so mad. One day I didn't come home. I just drove to my parents' house and sobbed. My dad drove me back to our home. He told me the secret to a good marriage is simply not getting divorced. Wow. So when you're up against that, when you're up against your own parents, when you're up against your upbringing, your the maybe some dogma as well, how do you make that choice well, we're pushed to it, and at some point, it's about being healthy, and the fact that marriage it exists now as a common thing, because when in our upbringing, it was not a common thing at all. Um, it does make it easier in some ways.
And the only reason that it wasn't common at all is because we didn't have the freedom to get jobs like we do now. We didn't have the ability to get a credit card.
Yep.
We didn't have the ability to own a home. So that is why.
74% of divorced women report feeling liberated. You and I do.
Yep,
37% of men.
correct. And as she points throughout, it's because the institution of marriage benefits the man the most.
Absolutely.
So this is the the part that I wanted to read. There is nothing easy about divorce, not legally, not emotionally, because what it requires is burning everything down to the ground and rebuilding with completely different materials. That's
I
exactly what that
totally agree.
was.
And I've rebuilt with new materials, and I like
Me too.
it.
And just kind of talking about housing, I learned something else from my experience, that where you live doesn't really matter in a way after the divorce, after you separate. I lived in a duplex, which my children thought was just horrible, and were ashamed of. And I picked it because A, I could afford it, and B, it was within few blocks distance from the house, so they could bike. Was my thought. And for me, I saw this rental property shared with the college students next door as an oasis, because I could walk through that door and it was mine. It was my choosing how I wanted to decorate it, what I wanted to have in it, how I wanted to present it. There was no complaining, there was no hurting me. I walked into silence, I walked into my dog, I walked into safety. And I began to realize that a home should be a place where everyone who lives in that house finds it to be a place to refill, to recharge, and to be safe from the world. And I learned that living by myself, even though we had 50-50 custody, um, the time that I was especially by myself with no kids during that time was safe for me. It was not safe for the kids. And what I had asked for actually was what they called nesting, but he would have no part of it. I said, this is where let's not disrupt their lives while we are in the process of figuring it out. Let's you and I swap back and forth between these two places so that the kids will have the norm of everything in their own closets. They will have the same things, their same environment, because they're not choosing this. We are, or I am. So he made it very clear, no, you're choosing this. So it was my fault. And yes, it was. The instigation of the divorce was my fault, but he could never see the fact that maybe there was a reason that this person was leaving a relationship, not because of drugs, alcohol, or another human. It was that human that I was leaving it for. So he could not nest because it didn't matter if it was best for the children. It mattered that he stayed in that territory. And honestly, I was almost relieved because I did not want to walk into that house that started to have feelings of being unsafe. It was not my house, it was his house that I created for him. He even, when we did our kitchen remodel, he didn't like the countertops so low. So he had them all raised so that it would work with his body. Although I was the stay-at-home wife that did 99% of the cooking. So even the kitchen became his. And his next plan was to raise the toilets so that it would fit his body. But I left before we got to the toilets.
I'm glad you didn't have to endure the toilet. Yeah. No, it's interesting, in my situation, he when, we spent that awkward time, where we're both in the house in different rooms, and I felt very unsafe. I felt, um, afraid, and, finally, he and I wasn't gonna leave because yeah, this was my house, and the
Right.
reality is there was nothing in it that was his that he did. There was nothing, not a single thing he hung on the wall, not a single because he didn't, and nothing that he had done to update it, or there was nothing in there that represented him. Not because I had to have it my way, but because he was that disinterested in it that he was fine with whatever I did because I provided that labor and those decisions. And so I didn't see it as people say, "Oh, there's his ghost is in the house," or he still feels here. Never felt that. When he finally left, he was gone, and it was like, God, can I change the locks? Yeah, and that was it. Just change the locks.
And for me, although I did it all had to pass his blessing. And so we had dead bugs on the wall because he loved dead bugs. And honestly, not his fault. I wanted to make him happy, and he didn't want to buy other things. So I looked at his dead bug collection and I said, okay, well, let's get that framed. So everything I did, though, and that's where I can't be angry, was again, I wanted so much to love him, to make it an environment for him. And my disease really was not realizing I deserve that as well,
Yep.
that I deserve to have a piece of me in that home too, and not let it all be centered around his ultimate decision making. But the room that I did hold as my own was ironically the tutoring room, where I painted it the color I wanted, and I had, I decorated the way I wanted it. So at least I had one room, and isn't it funny? It was my work environment room, but that was the place where I felt was mine. So really, in walking away from this whole remodel that we did on this house, the backyard, I by then I had given up. He had it the way he wanted it, and at that point I'm like, whatever, because I never would have done the things that he had done. The front, whatever. I wouldn't have done the things he did. And I again, here's the liberation, and I'm smiling as I'm telling you. I'm now able to do whatever I want. I'm not compromising anymore. The house that I have is my choice. The way I want to paint it is my decision. And I'm grateful for that. And it wouldn't have been that way. I would have died never knowing who am I.
Yeah, you would have died never knowing who you were. Yeah, I wish that I hope I send that out there that women don't feel that way, that they're able to know who they are.
Are we on our last chapter for this week,
I
Sue?
think so. Let's see. Chapter 7,
The
the
dress.
revenge dress. I can't relate. I don't wear dresses.
I so related how she referred to Princess Diana, and and it made me realize, yes, how we dress says a lot. Um, and it is the picture that we paint, and we do use dressing to paint that picture. Are you modest? Are you flamboyant? Are you bright colors? Are you dim colors? Are you black? I thought it was just such a telling chapter, and I loved how she talked about the reason for her dress was that she wanted to empower her body, because she even felt that she didn't have power over her body. And on some level, I haven't quite figured that one out. That will be something else that's processing, is the loss of the body and what it's used for. I would have to say what comes to mind right now. I lost, and this is by choosing to stay at home, I felt I lost my mind. And what I mean is that it's important when you have a mind and you like thinking that you maintain a job outside of the home. So, Sue, you know how I felt at that time about being at home and that it was the right decision for me. But as I continued onward, especially when both kids were in school, I would never recommend that to anybody. I would never recommend to my kids that they stay at home full time. I believe that you need to have contact with the outside world, that you need to use a brain. If you enjoy thinking and you like learning and you have an education, it is a soul sucking, mind sucking thing to do that does not set you up for a good situation where you're only focusing on the cleanliness of the home and maintaining everybody's physical needs. You need to nurture your mind as much as you do the environment. So, to all of you who are listening, if you have girls, I would highly recommend that everybody should work at least part time.
Or if not work, it could be something else as long as you've got that active engagement outside the home.
Yes, mental whatever, stimulation. That's what I lacked. You're right.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting how you
Oh,
related to it, and I didn't, and I felt like it was, I don't know. I don't I
so
don't recognize myself as a revenge dress person.
um, I'm going to jump to something in a minute. Just want to sum up the dress. So the dress for her was the reclaiming her body. And for me, the dress is reclaiming my mind. And I can't quite explain it other than what I just did. However, Sue, there is a part of my body that she also talks about, and I don't want to go into it since we do have children, but there is a reclaiming of your own body, whether it's with a dress or not.
I agree. Um, well, it's a reclaiming of your body. For me, I was just so grateful when he re-engaged with he found someone to date and got totally into that. And then he yeah, I was just grateful to that person. It's like feel very sorry for you, um, but God bless you. I was grateful to have time for myself.
I think this might be an empowerment thing that I would want my girls to know. So, one of my friends shared with me what a therapist had told her, and that is that you should never have sex with your husband if you're just taking one for the team. And there's nothing wrong with saying no, even though you're married. And I think in our culture, and at least in the old days of our generation, it's just something that it is the man's right to get his needs met. And as women who are people pleasers most of the time, how often is it that we simply just live through the experience to make another person happy? And what I learned is that's not something that we ever have had to do, nothing we should ever do. And that is also a reclaiming of your body, is deciding if you want it, whether there is guilt or shame or um, condemnation, no matter what comes behind it from the other person, that is not something you ever should have to sacrifice. Not in a healthy relationship. No.
Agreed. That wraps up this episode of Retired. Thanks for listening.
Join us next week on our next adventure in retirement. Until then, please feel free to lend your feedback or ask questions by emailing us at retiredpodcastnewthread@gmail.com. You're invited to follow us on Facebook at Retired Podcast New Trend. Check the show notes for links and contact information.
Retired is co-hosted by Sue Britz and Tina Lookbach. It is produced, directed, and edited by me, Sue Britz. Music and graphics are by me too. Please click to subscribe so that you won't miss your chance to join
Join
our retired road trip.